Hello. This webinar is an introduction to a Key Stage 5 report, predominantly for new users. If you have used a Key Stage 5 report before, but you just want an update on how it might, the methodology might be, then please stay tuned and we'll go through some of the basics. So firstly, I'm going to talk you through the outline of the session. We're going to look at the Alps philosophy. We're then going to look at the Alps methodology, that's the numbers and the statistics behind the data that you see in your report. And then we're going to go through in a little bit of detail the various levels of Alps analysis that you get in the report at school, subject and at student level. So the Alps philosophy. We believe that every student is an individual and an exception and to be valued. And as such, the report is written from the basis that all of the data in here, all the way down to student level, is important. You can see that there are some strategic pages, there are some subject pages, but also we're looking at every individual student and how you as a school have added value to their progress through their school career, in this instance from the beginning of year 12 to the end of year 13. And we also understand that leaders who work really hard to embed Alps across the school, both from staff level and at student level, will prosper most from the report and all of the interventions that that report might bring. Staff training is really important. If staff understand where the data comes from and what you're trying to do with it, then that's really, really good. Students need also to understand where their minimum expected grades have been generated and the purpose of giving them those minimum expected grades, not necessarily as targets, but as a starting point for their aspirations. And between the students and the staff and other interested parties, for example, parents and governors, it is something which can raise achievement and attainment, but most of all, the value that you add to students. For those of you that have seen Alps before, we have a new way of presenting the information to you. So we have now split our Alps reports into the explanation pages and the methodology, which is in our Alps guide found on our website. And all that you will get now in an Alps provider report is the school level data, the subject level data and the student level data without all of the detailed methodology, but with just some hints and tips attached. So we have a starting point. That starting point must be what the student joins year 12 with, or your first year if you're in a college, and that is their average GCSE point score. You can see here that we have currently two different ways in which those points can be made up. We have our reformed grades here, 1 to 9, which we are converting for this year, 2018, back into an Alps point score between 1 and 8, or 0 and 8 if they've got a U. But you can also see the points totals that are allocated to each of the legacy letter grades that students may have, and they range from 0 to 8 as well. And then to calculate the average GCSE score, we add up the points for each grade as these tables show, and then we divide by the number of GCSE subjects. We are taking into account half GCSEs and double GCSEs, obviously, but also you need to be aware that we're not taking into account any BTEC or equivalent grades that themselves would have equivalencies in terms of points. So we're only looking for the GCSEs to make up this average GCSE point score. You can see here there's an example calculation for a student that completes 8 GCSEs, and you can see all of their grades and number grades across the top here, which total this amount, which then divided here by 9, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 GCSE grades, even though it was 8 subjects, we end up with 6.37. And then what we're going to do is to compare that input score with their output score. Now at Alps, we are continuing to use the old UCAS points as an Alps points total for subjects. So you can see here what you were used to a couple of years ago with your UCAS grades. So an A star is 140 points, an A is 120, and so on. And whilst we appreciate that fewer and fewer of you are doing ASs now, if students do have ASs as well, we'll also be taking those into account. So we have benchmarks that we use to provide a basis for our measurement for student progress, and they, I'm sure you know, are based on the national data set, so that we work with the DFE 2 or 3 times a year, and at a point in time during the year, the DFE send us the whole national database, which we then use to rank performance across a huge variety of different measures. And you can see here how we might use that data, first of all, to create 11 sub-bands of prior attainment, and thus calculate minimum expected grades for students, and therefore be able to add or to measure added value. So you can see here the ringed column here. At the top, we can see that there is a sub-band of prior attainment. These are the most able students that are joining you in year 12 or in year 1 of their course. And you can see the total number of students that are in that data set. So that's a really robust data set. That's 10.3% of the total student population in the data set that we're using. And you can see here at the 100th percentile and at the 0 percentile, the representative grade that we would expect a student to get if they were at the 100th percentile. Now, we as Alps are going to set our minimum expected grades at the 75th percentile. So for the best attaining or prior attaining students here, these are your AA star 8, 9 students here. What really we're going to expect is that those students get an A star, and that's the representative grade that we would set them as a minimum expected grade. Actually, we're going to measure them against the exact point at which our ranking finds the 75th percentile, so at 124.33. Equally, you can see over here more modest prior attainment, and it does go down to 0 over here, but more modest prior attainment here, and their minimum expected grade would be a C+, and you can see that it's C+ because it's 82.22, which is just over the UCAS total for an old C. So Alps set minimum targets for bands of students, and it's 11 prior attainment bands based on the performance of the top 25% of schools in that prior attainment band. We challenge students to reach those aspirational goals. We don't provide best fit graphs or chances graphs where a number of different grades might be available to students, but we're challenging to reach that 75th percentile or beyond. But remember that it's a minimum expected grade, and we would love schools to push their students even harder towards grades above that minimum expectation. And we do suggest that if you set that expectation early with each student and explain why it's very important, then actually students are best placed to reach for that minimum expected grade and beyond. So benchmarks for 2018 A-level results, you can see here the 75th percentile across the whole band, and you can see here the range of indicative grades that students might be expected to achieve across all of their A-levels. Remember, we're not setting individual targets for individual subjects. That differentiation will come a little later when I explain the methodology. But these actually in our calculations are the numbers that we would expect students to get. Obviously, they can't get those numbers, but when we total or aggregate all of the student performances together, actually we're in a position where we can use those numbers very accurately. And there are all of our minimum expected grades. You can see the prior attainment. You can see that we've given the equivalent QCA score, although when you give us your prior attainment data, we need it in this format here, the GCSE point score. And you can see the targets at A level, double A level if you're still doing any of those, and ASs, but we do appreciate that they are becoming fewer and fewer as we go through. So what is the Alps analysis, given the fact that we've now got an input score and an output score? How are we measuring? Well, we're trying to give you, or we are giving you, measurements and indicators at a school or college level. We're giving you indicators at a departmental level and at an individual level. And And you can see the first page that you would come across in a report, and this is really important for the person who's in charge of the data entry, is the raw results page. And this is just a snip of part of a raw results page, but in your booklet you would be able to see that these grades here and these entries were the equivalent entries to those which you've got in your exam manager output from SIMS, so that you know that the data that you've given us is good. You can see here we've also given you some breakdown by subject of A star to E, A star to C, and A star to B, because that's useful. It's nice here that we've given you an average GCSE point score on entry for the cohort for this subject. So you can see the types of subjects that might attract a higher or a lower GCSE input score. And there's the equivalent QCA score. And just to go through some basic indicators, we are going to use a thermometer to measure the value that you add to students. And this thermometer will be shown both at school level and at subject level. And as you know, a thermometer is hot at the top and it's cold at the bottom here, and in the middle we've got 50% of our performance, which we're labeling black. So red matches the top 25% of performance. Actually, a grade 2 matches the top 10% of the performance, and a grade 1 tells you, if you have it, that you have performed equal to or better than the top performing school in the data set for the previous year. 50% of the indicators, or 50% of the performance from the previous year's data set, is in this middle 3 bands. And then if you find yourself blue, that means you match the bottom 25% of performance, either against other schools in the data set, or when you're looking subject level, against other subjects in the subject data set. So again, you'll be scored 1 to 9, 1 being the best and 9 being the lowest. You'll be colored red, black, and blue, and red is 1 to 3, black is 4, 5, 6, and blue is 7, 8, 9. And the thermometers we think are easily understandable, and so they provide a very, very quick understanding of how well you've done before you start to dive into the data a little bit more deeply. So the strategic overview. First thing we're going to do on our strategic overview is to give you some raw data that we're able to extract from the data that you send us. So you can see the total number of students, you can look at the students who are on mixed study programs, and you can look at the total number of entries, again referring back to that raw data page. What we do also is we show you the split between high, mid, and low achievers, and you can also see the average GCSE input score for the cohort of students that we're discussing. We then make some indicators for you in comparison to the national data, and we provide a T-score, a red teaching and learning score, a blue teaching and learning score, and a provider A-level quality indicator score. We will also provide you with a 3-year T-score, and it's my job now to just talk you through what each of those are. You can also see an indicator down here on row 6 about the A-levels that are on target. You'll also see that we provide you, if you provide us with 4 years worth of historical data, we can provide you with 4 years worth of analysis. Even if you just buy our product this year, provide us with 4 years worth of data and we will give you 4 years worth of trend. So I'm going to start with the quality indicator, what we would call a QI indicator. You can see that we are looking at the performance of all the individual subjects. We are taking into account each of the entries for each of those individual subjects. We are looking at the expected points total from the student's prior attainment. We are then actually looking also at the actual points that that student or that student cohort in, let's say, art gained. We're then providing a score, which is an Alps score from on our thermometer, and an Alps grade, which uses this score on the thermometer. So here in the equation, you can see it's actual points minus the expected points, which once we've put it through the equation, will give us a score and a grade. You can see here that the score is 1.01. 1.01 takes us right to the cusp of a 2 because it's 1.01 which creates a 2, and you can see all of the subjects that make that up. Obviously, the more students in each subject, the more the scores in that subject have an effect on the indicator. You can see here those 4 years worth of data again. Very simply, you can start already to see the trends in the subjects, although we'll come to subject level analysis in a minute. But 4 years worth of data and the color indicators that we've got start to give you a picture of how that subject has done over time. We will also allow you to look at the quality of teaching, and the quality of teaching is here. We can look at your red teaching thermometer and your blue teaching thermometer. Now, your red teaching thermometer actually is telling you the number of entries that find themselves in subjects which are colored red, 1, 2, or 3. Your blue teaching thermometer is telling you subjects which are colored blue, which find themselves in the bottom 25%. So we're looking at the volume of good teaching and learning that students get, and we're looking at the volume of poor or less good teaching and learning that students get. We could just look at the number of red classes and the number of blue classes, but actually it's all dependent on how many students are doing those classes. So here you can see in 17-18, 43.8% of entries found themselves in red classes, and that was a good outcome because that's top 25%. Here you can see 44.2% of entries found themselves in classes 4, 5, and 6, labelled black. And here you can see that 12% of entries found themselves in blue classes. Now, if we just look at this trend here from a strategic point of view, then from this point here, 4 years ago, there's been a huge improvement, and we've taken lots of students out of blue classes, and we've shifted them from blue to black, and some have moved from black to red. And that's the process which all schools want to take on, from blue to black and from black to red. So here we have those analyses again. You can see your provider A-level quality indicator, and the school has made great strides over the last 3 years. You can see here red teaching has also improved. Blue teaching has fluctuated a little bit. Your T-score is just an aggregation of these 3 numbers, 2, 3, and 4 makes 9, divided by those 3, making a score of 3, and then placed on a thermometer. Your 3-year T-score is an aggregation of 9 scores, those there, and that divided by 9 comes to 3.67. And again, this school finds itself 3 on the thermometer, top 25%. So we can now look at Alps analysis by subject. And this is an indication of the subject page that you'll get for each subject. So here you can see how we calculate the expected points total for maths in this case. Here you can see how we add together all of the actual grades and points that students get. Here you can see the calculation on a subject level, whereas previously we were seeing it on a whole school level. Here you can see 4 years worth of data for maths only. Here you can see where maths is placed on a maths specific thermometer. And here you were able to see all of the students that took maths. You've got their average GCSE point score, and you've got their actual grades versus their expected grades. So you can make individual student comparisons about how well they did. So top left-hand corner, we said that we would see expected points. You can see here that the cohort of maths spreads out right across the prior attainment bands, from one student who came into the maths class between 0 and 4, which would be D-ish or lower. And then you can see there are 5 students which are AA star students right at the top, and you can see we've got lots of students in between. And you can see for each of those students there was a target, and then we times the target by the number of students in each prior attainment band to get the total expected points both for that prior attainment band and then right at the bottom the expected points total for the cohort taking maths. You can then see the actual points that student scored at A level. And here we've got 6 students getting an A star times by the 140 that an A star would get, with an actual points total of 840 points. And all the way along, you can see all the points that were actually scored by the students in the cohort, and they actually scored 4,840 points. Now, actual minus expected is 4,840 points minus the expected, which is 4,704. So we actually got more than we expected, which brings a figure above 1.00, and that will always be the case if you get more points than expected. And the maths has scored 1.03, and that gives them a grade 3 on an Alps thermometer, so it puts them in the top 25% when you compare this maths class with all other maths classes in the national data set. And you can see here that maths has taken great strides over the last 4 years, because in 14-15 it was an 8, in 15-16 it was a 7, in 16-17 it was a 5, and in 17-18 it finds itself red for the first time. It's moved from the blue to the black to the red. Now, the difference of 0.2 of a grade here is the difference of a grade of value. So from here to here, the maths department have added an extra grade of value and more to every student in maths. 0.8 to 1.00 would be a whole grade of value added over those 4 years. If we're to compare, we're at 1.03, and therefore it's just slightly more than a grade of value to every student from this point here to that point there. And here you can see the amount of data that's just in that maths calculation. Within our rankings and our benchmarks, we've got 1,824 A-level maths departments and nearly 70,000 students. So when we compare your maths department with all the other maths departments, you can see that there's a lot of data behind that comparison. And the other thing to be aware of, and this is where the differential comes in, not necessarily with the student minimum expected grade across subjects, but the expectation of different subjects to be in the top 25%, let's say, depends on the national data set for that individual subject. So if we look at biology, there are 45,000 or more students in the data set, 1,500 providers in our data set. But in order to be in the top 25% for biology, the biology needs to score 0.91. Now, 0.91 is almost half a grade of value less than everybody in biology getting their minimum expected grade. That's not because biology is harder than maths, it's just because of the way that the data comes to us from the DFE and the distribution of grades that the biology national data set presents to us. You can see that lots of different subjects have lots of different benchmarks, not only at the 75th percentile here, which turns you red, but also at the 0.6 here, which will turn you from blue to black, and even at the grade 1 point. All of that data is in our guide. So you can see here 3 typical A-level subjects, each with a different score required to get into the top 25%. Maths requires exactly everybody getting their minimum expected grade at 1.00. Sociology requires the students on average in sociology to get half a grade more than their minimum expected grade to be ranked as a top 25% sociology group, and business requires a little more than everybody getting their minimum expected grade to be top 25%. Now we're going to look at the analysis by student. So the Alps analysis, the student performance overview, actually gives you by student and ordered in this instance by their average GCSE point score, the performance that they gained in each of the subjects that they took, and each of those subjects is color-coded to show you how they performed against their minimum expected grade. So student 1444 actually was on or above target in maths and further maths, got the lower of split grade targets in French and EPQ, but in Spanish was below target by more than 1 grade. And if you understand the colours, then you can see very, very quickly how each student has performed in each of their different subjects. And you may also be able to see trends at certain prior attainment points, because we've split the students up in the report by their minimum expected grade outcomes so that you can see them in order. You've also got up here the A levels that were on target. On target here being that plus that, the lower of a split grade or the higher of a split grade or higher still. Now, it's worth knowing that all of that data is also given to you as an Excel spreadsheet. And just like every other Excel spreadsheet, it's really flexible in the way that you can interrogate the data once you've downloaded that in Excel, because you can sort on any of those aspects and make some conclusions about how things are looking, both from an individual student's point of view or from particular groups of students' points of view or from a subject point of view. And the other interesting thing is, obviously, in an Excel spreadsheet, you can also add your own custom fields, which you can then sort on. Many people miss this as one of the downloads that we give you, but I think it's a really important document. Now, for those of you who are just getting reports, we think it's probably just worth indicating that there is also a web-based platform called Alps Interactive, which you could subscribe to, which will give you all of that data. It uses the Alps methodology throughout. It's as easy to use and to understand as one of our reports, but the significant difference is that it gives you a detailed analysis of your end of year results, but it also enables you to upload as many in-year predicted grade points as you wish for as many years as you want to. So it works at Key Stage 4 for years 9, 10 and 11, and it works at Key Stage 5 for year 12 and 13. And so if, let's say, for example, we're looking at Key Stage 5 and you have 4 report periods in year 12 and 3 in year 13, plus you have some end of year internal examinations, it may well be that you could add 8 or 9 different report periods into Connect Interactive, and you would be able to generate the same data that you've seen in the report, and you would be able to interrogate it and intervene with students and staff as you saw necessary. Now, because we've got our interactive website, things are moving on apace in terms of the interactivity of Connect Interactive. So we would love you to keep up to date with our website. Not only does it talk to you about all the new things that are coming on online, but it will also talk to you about the updates for 2018. It will talk about target setting for students. And we have a huge and expanding knowledge base, which will enable you to have a look to see if there are things that you don't understand. We also are available on this web address, and obviously at the end of the phone should you wish to talk to us directly. Okay, it only wishes for me to wish you a good year using your Alps report to move students' progress further forward. Thank you.